Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hi.
I'm Susan.
We are at we've reached the end of our lecture series.
This is the last one of the series.
Some may be overjoyed. Some may be sad.
Hey, can I just tell you something randomly that I don't know if you realize?
Sure.
In one of the episodes of the lecture series, we're wearing shirts that are the same color. Random factoid.
So there's been a couple podcasts that I listen to who have done like in the off season of something, if they're covering a certain thing that is, hot one part of the year, but a little cooler in the other parts of the year.
Yeah.
They've done stuff like this where like, we're going to go and explore the history of blah, blah, blah.
Something else. Yeah.
And sometimes it's interesting. And sometimes it's like, no, I just want to listen to the show that I like.
The normal show, not the normal
show.
So are you afraid that that's what people will say about this series?
No. Hey, I mean, I don't care. But
you heard it, folks.
Yeah, I know.
He doesn't care. You do care.
No. In all seriousness,
he doesn't care because he's not getting paid. So would someone please send in $1 because then I can tell him he's getting paid and he needs to up the ante.
So it's not like we're like not doing the podcast anymore. Right? This is just a temporary thing.
The series, yeah.
Yeah. So people don't like it, they can
and
just
we're gonna go. We're always
say lecture series anymore.
But we're always trying new things. We're often trying new things on the podcast. Anyway, that was a strange introduction to this one.
It's gonna get stranger.
Oh my gosh. It's Friday. I can tell it's Friday.
Today's podcast by talking about the ship of Theseus.
What?
The ship of Theseus.
Okay, I don't know.
The ship of Theseus.
I have no idea what you're talking about. What is the ship of Theseus?
Yes, Theseus, the mystical Greek founder of Athens.
Okay. You mean he wasn't really the founder?
Well, it's sort of legend. It's
the legend of the founder of
this
Athens.
Is before Herodotus. So
I have no idea what you're talking.
Herodotus
obviously
wrote a book called The Histories, and it was really when history in sort of what we would consider Western civilization starts.
Yeah,
because he was the one who started writing about. Okay, so here, then this happened, then this other thing happened. Before then, people didn't really write like historical.
They just told stories.
People told stories. So, according to this sort of legend, epic something.
Yeah.
So Theseus, he rescued the children of Athens from King Minos after slaying the Minotaur, and then escaped onto a ship going to Delos.
Oh, that's why it's called the ship of.
Yeah, each year the Athenians commemorated this by taking the ship on a pilgrimage to Delos to honor Apollo.
Okay.
So they take this ship.
Yeah.
To Delos for hundreds of years.
Okay.
And it's a wooden ship, right? Okay. So you'll get things start to rot and deteriorate. Yeah. And so when a plank would get old, whatever, they just replace it.
Okay.
So so according to this Life of Theseus, the ship wherein Theseus and the youth of Athens returned from Crete had 30 oars and was preserved by the Athenians down to even the time, blah, 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 blah. So they took away the old planks as they decayed, putting in new and stronger timbers in their places, insomuch this ship became a standing example for the logical question of things that grow. One side holding that the ship remained the same, and the other that it was not the same. So the ship of Theseus is great because it's a ship that over the course of time, each timber has been replaced. So there's not a single
bit of the ship.
The original
ship,
but it's doing the same thing and it looks the same.
So
and
it's
it's been
called the
replaced
ship.
one piece at a time, right? So at what if is it still the ship of Theseus, or is it a different ship?
It's a different ship.
And if
And
it
at
is
what
a different ship,
point did it
when
turn
did it
into?
become different?
All right. So do you want to tell me what this has to do with the conversation we're having here?
Sure, but you should. Do you have any? First of all, I was just surprised that you had not heard of this.
Well, I have,
or at least by name.
For a couple of reasons. I have that we don't have to go into here unless you want me to. I have big holes in my education, just big gaping holes of which, even though I have a degree, a college degree, and a master's and a PhD, there are these big pieces of knowledge of which I never got anything. And this whole thing, which I don't even know what we would call this, the classics or something.
This was not. I don't think
history
this was taught in
or
school.
Western civilization.
This is not taught in school.
Oh,
this is just like a thing you
that some
about.
People have. Well, okay, well, whatever. No, I have no idea
like
what
Moore's law. Like you're not gonna like really learn. Like maybe
okay.
If you're taking a class, you can learn about it. But it's just
I don't know anything. All the people you just mentioned with the Herodotus, the H guy.
No, in fairness, it's because I took a number of classes on.
Well, this is what I was trying to say, and I didn't take any classes, nor do I do any.
That's rare. Like most people would not run into that kind of stuff.
All right, so no, the answer is no. I don't know anything about this.
Okay, so what's your instinct? Is it
about
the same ship or is it a different ship?
Well, I think there's an answer about reality and an answer about culture, and I would answer differently for those two things.
Okay.
So in reality, it is not the same ship, but culturally, for this group of people, it is the same ship.
Okay. That's a fair answer. I'm not here to argue for 40 minutes about the ship of Theseus.
Good.
But I bring it up because I do think that we run into various ships of Theseus's problems in
our field,
UX, and especially when we talk about design systems.
Yeah.
In which there's a lot of like projects usually run one of two paths. They either do like we have a new initiative and we're redoing, the way we're redoing the whole app. We're reconfiguring. We have a new
technology, new platform,
based,
new opportunity,
and there's this
new audience, something.
So there's like one side where it's like we're just going to replace the whole thing that we have.
Yeah.
And then there's the other thing where it's like slowly, bit
over
by bit,
time, we're gonna change this part, and then we're gonna change this part. Yeah. Okay.
And what's sort of funny is oftentimes, you've been on enough of these projects where they do this whole refactoring and blah blah blah, and it's the same. It's the same. Maybe it looks a little different, or it has another
doesn't
feature.
Even look. Maybe the underneath stuff is different.
Yeah, or maybe the underlying code is different, but the user interface is the same.
Yeah.
And so there is sort of like okay, you did all this stuff, but like,
what did you really change?
What did you really change? Does it matter that things are like, so there's sort of like a change for change sake a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe, it's a little stretch to talk about the ship of Theseus a little bit, but I do think there's sort of a philosophical question about when you are changing platforms, when you are changing interfaces, when you are making changes.
So do you think this applies even when you're making like behavioral design changes, which is
if you're not using a new product, and most of the time, 90% of the time, I think UXers and other project people are working on, even if it's a new product, it's a new product that's really just upgrading from an old product.
Yeah.
Right. It's a brand new iPhone 14. Well, it's just replacing the 13, right? So you're not, it's not very, very rarely.
Rarely are we working on things that are brand new. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do, but most of the time we don't. It is
a replacement. It's putting a new, piece of wood on the ship that was already there.
Okay.
People used to order the product from the website, and now people still order the product from the website, but it's like newer.
So, do you know why you're bringing this up right now?
Well, I mean, we were eventually going to tie. I mean, our topic is to tie in design systems and go more in depth about how they interact.
Well, not design systems. I wouldn't use
behavioral design.
Behavioral design and different methodologies.
And different methodologies and how it sort of ties in. But I just wanted to start with the theoretical question about like why
is it really different?
Yeah, like I mean, why are people, why do people use a design system or a methodology in the first place? I don't think we need to answer that, but just to keep that in mind, that like these things are not necessarily in a vacuum, and things are changing, and it's sort of like the nature of UX and design to like change for change's sake, maybe in some capacity, just because there's like a, you call it a muddle, but there's also like if you just stay still, your competition from a UI perspective or a feature perspective, one or the other, will surpass you.
Maybe, but based on what you just said, they might not.
No, well, in a feature or an aesthetic or in a UI.
Well, I do think there is in general, and this probably does go back to the muddle, but I will try not to introduce the muddle idea here. But I think in general, there is a sense that things could be better. We could do a better job at getting people to take certain behaviors. We could do a better job than what we did now. We could do a better job than our competition. We could, sell more or whatever it is. And I think in general, I mean, it's an interesting question, Guthrie, because I think about my consulting career. And of course, we're going to have a biased view, because people don't bring us in when they think everything is wonderful, right? They bring us in when there's something that they want to do differently and they're not sure how, or they've tried and it hasn't gone as they hoped. And so it's like, let's bring someone in who has some experience. But I think in general, I don't know. It's a great question. I'm just trying to think of the clients we have and what percentage of their current, software products that they've created would they say, oh my God, that's great. That works fine. We don't have to make any changes. I don't know. It's an interesting question. But I do think the whole behavioral design, people want to do behavioral design because they feel they are not being effective enough in getting people to take particular actions with their products. And so the question is, are we missing something? Could we be doing this better? And I think, the thing that we said we wanted to talk about today was assuming that you want to do behavioral design, how well does that, or how well doesn't it fit with whatever design methodology you're currently using? So, if you're doing user-centered design, if you're doing design thinking, if you're doing agile, this whole idea of how you build in behavioral design, does it fit, or are you going to have a problem? That I think is our topic for this episode, right?
Sure.
So I guess,
dive in. Pick one.
Pick one and just talk about it. All right, we're going to talk about 3. We're going to talk about agile. We're going to talk about user-centered design. We're going to talk about design thinking. So, which one do you want to start with?
Let's do design thinking first.
Okay, let's do design thinking. So, I mean, we have an assumption here that the people listening know what design thinking is. Maybe that's.
Give a.
I'll give a really high level, a summary. So, design thinking, very popular methodology process used all over the world by many companies. Started at Stanford Design School. Actually started before Stanford had a design school. It's kind of was why they came up with a design school, because they came up with design thinking. The idea behind design thinking are that you first have to empathize with the user, i.e., do user research. And then by doing that, you figure out what problem you really should be solving. And then you frame the problem very carefully. And then you ideate on different solutions to the problem. And then you come up with multiple prototypes that would solve the problem. And then you test and get feedback on the problem. And you do all of that before you actually, go create anything. That is the very simplified version of design thinking. So a lot of emphasis on making sure you solve the right problem, and a lot of emphasis on, empathizing or doing research ahead of time. So is that an okay summary?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So here's the question then. In that methodology, where does behavioral design fit, or how does it fit, or does it fit well? So I want to just remind people, because we talked about this in the previous episode. If you listen to it, we said that in behavioral design, we're paying a lot of attention to moments that matter. We're paying a lot of attention to particular moments and figuring out when someone is doing this thing and they're looking at the screen, or they're having this particular conversation with the voice interface, what are the things that we as designers can do to encourage them to take a particular action? So now the question is, how well does having that goal fit into the design thinking method? So Guthrie, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think the answer is? Do you think that it's easy or hard to figure out how to build behavioral design into design thinking method?
I think it's easy.
Okay.
In theory. I don't think anyone does really either of them, but
you don't think people do either of what? They don't do design thinking?
They do, but do they really do it in the full way that you would want them to do it?
Some people do.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Why do you think it's easy to build it in?
Because I do kind of think that there's a spot for it
in the process.
In the process, I don't know.
What is the spot?
I gotta make sure I got
your terminology right.
Chart here.
Empathize, ideate, prototype, test. That would be the four main phases.
Well, empathize, define, ideate.
Yes, thank you. Empathize, define.
That's why I'm looking things up here.
Ideate, prototype, test.
There's different versions. So I think because there's an ideate and a prototype phase right there.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to do BD stuff, it's right, like it's right there. You can put it in the ideate phase.
Yeah.
In when you're coming up with ideas, and then you can prototype and
test.
You can
build it in the prototype.
Yeah. So there's sort of like a spot for it.
There's a spot for it. And I agree with you, but I do want to say one of the things I think is difficult has to do with maybe a philosophy more than the methodology steps, which is, if you're doing design thinking, supposedly you are, empathizing by doing research on what users really need and what the underlying problem is. And then you are defining that, and then you are ideating a solution to that. And it's kind of weird because you aren't necessarily looking at this from the organization's point of view. Like behavioral design is a combination of what do people want to do versus what does the organization want them to do, and how you can resolve that possible difference. And in design thinking, supposedly, it's not about what the organization wants to do. It's about what does the user need that the organization is going to provide for them. So it's very supposedly I keep saying supposedly, meaning I don't really believe it, but it's supposed to be very user needs centric and not what the organization wants.
Right.
But like realistically, right, is the organization going to go build something that meets a user need but doesn't do anything for the organization? I don't think so. But so in a way, I think there is a place for it, but in a way, I'm a little worried about it. Like, I don't know, in a design thinking method, would you ever come up with the idea that we should have a banner ad at the top of the airline's website to try and get people to sign up for the credit card, which was the example we were using in our last episode? Would that ever come out of that? See, I don't think so.
Maybe in Define, you'd have to have define your objectives, and your objectives are to cram banner ads in for business needs.
See, but it wouldn't, because define is, how might we solve the fact that people want to compare the possible flights on their own customized criteria as easily as possible? Like, that's what you're doing in the define. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'll put what is it? A stake in the ground, or draw a line in the sand, or which metaphor is it?
Yeah, I think it's put a snake in the grass.
It's not a snake in the grass. I'm going to put a stake in the ground and say that design thinking and behavioral design are diametrically opposed. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
What do you think? I do. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say they are. And so if you want to do behavioral design work, if you want to encourage people to take a particular action, the only way that works in design thinking is if that particular action is totally selfless, if it doesn't benefit the organization and purely benefits the humans you're designing for. All right, wait, I have another question for you, Guthrie. In behavioral design work, what percentage of the time do you think you are trying to design for a behavior that totally benefits the user but does not benefit the organization necessarily? It's really totally from the point of view of the user.
Like 2?
Right. So I'm going to say that if you really are a classically trained and ardent supporter of design thinking, you're going to think behavioral design is a bad thing, and you're not going to want to build it into your design thinking methodology. That's what I'm going to say. Okay. So I've put a stake in the ground, or a snake in the grass, or whatever.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is the.
But I do agree with you that there's a place in there. But I think from a methodology point of view, it works okay. But I think from a philosophy point of view, it's really in opposition.
Okay, I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair.
Okay. So that was one.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is going back to a philosophy question. There is sort of like a, well, a lot of times, when you're talking about these different methodologies, there's like, oh, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And it's like, okay, well, this is the way that we do it.
Yeah,
here,
that's true. That's really true.
And
Yep.
we're just going to combine these things and mash these things up and kind of do things the way we want to do them.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Because actually, yeah, as you say that, I was thinking, you could. So if you decided to do design thinking in kind of your own diabolical, not user-centric way and go against the basic philosophical tenets of it, you could go through the whole design thinking process asking, how might we get people to sign up for the credit card? I mean, that could be your focus.
It could be.
And you could go through the design thinking process absolutely with that focus. So, I agree with you. People might say, well, I know that, design thinking usually is focusing on what the user really wants, but we've adapted it, and we're going to use the same process, but not just focus on what the user wants.
Right.
And you could still do all that upfront empathy user research, right? So that you deeply understand why people are coming to the website and what they want and what they expect and so on. And you could still do all that, but you could still answer the question, how might we get people to sign up for the credit card? Guthrie, this is very interesting. I have never
Did I win you over?
I don't know. I'm fascinated. I've actually never used the design thinking process to come up with a solution to something that is not optimized for the users. Now I'm really curious. It might be extremely powerful and work like too well, and then it might cross the lines of ethics.
Well, this is the this is like the anti-problem.
What do you mean?
Well, there's the anti-problem.
Yeah, I know what an anti-problem is. Yeah.
So this is like very.
Oh, this is like using design thinking to design the anti-problem.
Yeah, in some ways. You taking it from like sort of the opposite perspective, right? Is that
okay? So this makes me want to ask an ethical question, which maybe we should not go down that rabbit hole.
You can ask it, and then I can say, "Nah, let's just
okay." All right. If we know that a methodology is particularly effective, should we use it to do things that we want that are perhaps not good for the user?
Sure, but it's all going to depend on the circumstances of that kind of stuff. It's sort of like
should we admit? Should we just all admit that what we're trying to do is get people to do what we want them to do, even though it might not be in their best interest?
Well, okay, so it's a little bit like if you're going to have like a political coup.
Okay.
if you're thinking that, hey, I'd like to overthrow the government or whatever, and I'm going to do that by having a legal decision that kind of pushes things in one direction or the other, you can find a justification. Like, you can find a way to have it be within if the Supreme Court, one way or the other, was like, hey, we really want to put our finger on the scale. Yeah. You can come up with a rationale to kind of pass or not pass basically any law you want in some capacity. If the whole point is to, once you're looking for the outcome, you can find a path there.
You can find it. Yeah.
And so whether you use the Supreme Court jurisprudence or design thinking or the UCD, if the goal is we want to have this end result, which is a thing that's like not really for the users, I think it's a little process independent. Like, it kind of doesn't matter what process you use. Like, if that's where you're trying to get to, you'll figure out a way to get there.
Well, I think there's, okay, I'm sorry I keep taking us down different paths, but this is all just making me, maybe it's just my way my brain is working today, but this made me think about the basic dilemma we have in behavioral design. And maybe in UX in general. I'm in a conversation with a client, and we're doing, like UX strategy, at the corporate level. And if you're doing UX strategy at the corporate level, it's all about aligning the UX work you're doing to what is important and of value to the organization. But inherently, isn't that often, and it's still, the whole thing is, and I think this is part of the frustration for UX people. Maybe, used to be. Maybe nobody cares anymore. But, the idea is, as a UX person, I'm an advocate for the user, and I want to design things that is what the user wants. But really, all the other forces at play here, including behavioral design, are in either somewhat or direct opposition to that. And even just doing UX strategy and aligning your UX department goals with the goals of the organization, by definition, means you may not be aligning your UX goals according to the needs of the users. So I think this is a problem. But okay, I'll put that aside.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, let's talk about, you want to talk about another methodology?
Sure, we can talk about another methodology.
Because we talked about how well behavioral design could fit into design thinking, and we decided that philosophically it might be a problem, but methodologically it should fit in well. And now we've got the other two that we talked about was user-centered design and agile. Which one do you want to do next?
Yeah, let's do UCD.
UCD, user-centered design. Yeah. So at a very high level, I should give my high-level summary about what user-centered design is?
Sure.
Sure. We have a colleague that we met with last week, and I talked recently with him about the fact that he was complaining that there is, there's a basic methodology about what design thinking is. There's a basic methodology about what agile is. And as you said, everybody has their own version, but you could probably agree on the basic version. And he said there's no basic version of UCD. There isn't a standard version. I don't know if that's true or not, but thinking about user-centered design the way I'm used to doing it and the way I teach it, I'm going to say that it's definitely easy to build in behavioral design into that. Do you agree or do you disagree?
I agree. There's a UCD. I mean, the big thing about UCD, which is why it's fallen out of favor, is that there's lots of time for thinking and planning and scheming and thinking and planning
and doing task analysis and wireframing and prototyping and there's getting user feedback and iterating and modifying and all of that.
This thing and doing that thing.
So during the conceptual model design part of user-centered design, you could definitely build in behavioral design stuff. During the wireframing and then high fidelity prototyping, detailed design, you could certainly build in behavioral design stuff. So
yeah, there's lots of places to do lots of stuff like that. So that's why I sort of think that.
Although you kind of think that's a bad thing.
No, I know. I'm not expressing an opinion about it. I'm just saying.
But that's one of the criticisms.
It's one of the one of the reasons that it has fallen out of favor is just simply because it
there's a lot to it.
There's a lot. Yeah, it just takes too long, right? People get antsy.
Okay, all right, but that's fast. We've agreed that it would be easy to build it in, and based on the conversation we just had about design thinking, I don't think it has philosophical barriers. I don't think there's anything about, well, maybe there is, because again, the assumption is you're advocating for the user and what the user wants to do. However, there's lots of places in user-centered design where you are making decisions based on your goals and the goals of the stakeholders and the constraints of the technology and all of that. So I don't think there's a philosophical problem. So that one was easy and fast.
Yeah.
We should have taken up more time on that one, but that's the answer.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's yeah, it's,
So,
I think that's why UCD started in the first place, is that it's like, here, take this specialized skill set and thoughts, and now spend some time thinking about how to best apply it before you move ahead.
Yeah. Like yeah. So
that's basically UCD.
By definition, you could build behavioral design into that.
Yeah.
Because I do think, yeah. I mean, and in UCD, typically, I didn't go through this, but the steps are, it does typically involve some user research up front, like design thinking does. And then it has the conceptual model design, and then the detail design, and then the testing and iterating. Those are the basic.
Yeah. So the design thinking process is like, it's not foreign.
Wait a minute, you just said design thinking?
Yeah. No, I know. But so that's why I sort of think maybe it works, because it's not. There's still prototype and testing, and
well, there is in design thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They both have it.
Oh, they both have it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on to the dreaded agile.
The dreaded agile.
Yeah, you know how you know what a fan I am of agile.
Yeah, I know.
Agile, the methodology used by 99% of the of design and development organizations in the world, and of course, it has to be the one I have the most problems with. This just tells you that my life is just set up to be in constant conflict. Why did I do this? I am not a fan of agile in many ways. However, let's ignore that. Let's do the high level summary of what agile is. Well, that ought to be interesting, and then talk about whether behavioral design does or does not fit within it. So, Guthrie, who's going to do the high level summary of what agile is?
You. Let's just have you do it.
All right. I'm going to say a high level summary of the agile methodology is interesting because there really isn't an agile methodology. There isn't any one way that organizations do agile, although I think there are some things that the different agile methodologies have in common. But if I had to summarize agile, I would say that it is a development process, not a design process, and that it is based on breaking up large projects into small pieces that can be created and implemented efficiently. And these small pieces can be tested efficiently, and then they are and managed well, and then they are put together into a solution or a product. And the idea behind it is that we implement small pieces that are complete unto their own, and we build upon that, making changes as we need to as we go along.
What I would say is that the agile methodology is all about moving fast. It's about unsticking the levers and cogs in a complex machine that cause things to go slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of one of the reasons that I think that it has so much success, is because, especially in an organization, if things do get caught, and it goes real slow, then there's a sort of a pathway out where you can speed things up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so popular, because there was a lot of organizations that we were doing 10 things a month and now we're doing 20. This is great. This is fantastic.
Of course, I could argue with you about this, but okay.
No, I think that's.
But so we're not going to debate whether the world has gone downhill since Agile came on, because I would lose that debate, because 99% of all organizations are using it for a reason.
You would lose that debate, yes.
But let's talk about behavioral design.
Mm-hmm.
So does it fit well within this, or does it not fit well within this?
Boy. I mean, I don't think it fit. I guess my instinct is it doesn't fit super well.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
But what are your thoughts?
Well, why? No, I want to hear why you say that.
Just because, it's where is that piece where you can sort of have a long think about something?
Right.
Really, focus on, because the behavioral design stuff is complicated.
Yeah.
It's not MVP, not really.
You have to understand what, first you have to define what you want people to do. Then you have to understand how hard or easy is it going to be to get them to do that, and what would motivate them to do that, right? And then what's the best way to build that in, and where in Agile is there for all of that, all those decisions.
Right.
Because it is, also because it is at a micro level. And so where can you interrupt, the flow, the Agile flow, in order to put these things in? There's one interesting, I think there is one interesting way you can build behavioral design in that I think is not a particularly effective way. But I'm thinking about, the traditional view of A/B testing.
Yeah, for sure. I had that exact same thought as well.
So if what we want people to do is, let's go back to our example. We're going to have this, in our Agile work, we have identified a story in which, and I'm using story in the Agile way of using story. So, we know we want people to, we're going to have the banner at the top so people will click on the credit card learn more button. And that's a story we're building. That's in the plan for what we're building. And from a traditional behavioral design point of view, we would stop and think about, what are people's mental models, and how do they want to do this, and what might motivate them to do this, and therefore, what image to put and what words to put on the button and all of that. In Agile, as you said, there's not a lot of time and place for people to stop and think about these things and so on, and do an MVP and prototype it. But what you could do is someone could say, put a picture in there of blah blah blah, and let's test this picture versus that picture. or let's test the red button versus the blue button, or let's test the button that says learn more versus the button that says, become a card holder or something, right?
Right.
So in that regard, it wouldn't be hard to build it in.
You'd have to be able to measure your BD metrics.
Always, yeah.
That's easy enough to do.
Although I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
About Agile, which you may not be able to answer because I'm not implying that you're an Agile expert.
Definitely not.
The whole thing, one of the things about Agile is that, it is fast and you can iterate and you put things out there and then you collect real life data and then you come back and you make changes. But I really, in my experience working with Agile teams, they don't measure much once it goes out the door. It doesn't come back. You're supposed to be able to you're supposed to crank all this stuff out and then measure and then iterate. And I don't see the measure and iterate part going. It goes out the door and the whole team goes to the next items in the backlog and it never comes back in the door.
Right.
Like nobody's even looking unless there's a major fail. I don't see, and maybe again, it's just I'm working with a subset.
Well, I think there is some level of measuring and iterating, but it's sort of like, what is it that you're measuring and iterating? Like a lot of times, I think it's like just stuff that's not user based at all. So it's going to be like, bugs.
Yeah. I agree with you.
That kind of, we had code error problems or something.
Right.
Which is not, I mean, that's
it's important,
like an app
but
level,
it's not,
but it's not, it's not like,
it's not a design. It's not a UX
not measuring
design
the efficiency
thing.
of being able to use an interface. But I do think that there's a lot. Teams are not set up in most places where there is the team that creates it, and then there's the team that measures it after it's gone.
Well, aren't the teams supposed to create it and measure and iterate?
No,
they're empowered to do the whole thing?
But they never, no.
But they don't. They go on to the next feature.
They go on to the next feature. Of course they do. Yeah.
Unless, like you said, unless there's a big problem. And you're right. I think there is I'm thinking about one particular client we have, and this came up recently, and it was a separate team that was monitoring, usage on the other side. And they brought it back. They brought something back to the original team because of a problem.
I mean, there's just not like, there's not a lot of, I don't know, political will to be like, all right, let's redo, like, let's go back and spend time thinking about what we did and if we did it right. There's moving on, and then leave it up to the big data science team to measure, to find if there's problems. Okay. And then that just gets added into the queue. It's a little bit like an internal combustion engine, where it's you put fuel in and then it spins and then the wheels move, and that it's just a one way.
So
it's not like a regenerative braking thing where then you hit the right and then things
cycle
flow back
through
into the system.
So having said that, then I would say that although you might be able to build in maybe a behavioral design thing, it's going to be difficult. If you're doing Agile, it's going to be hard to test and iterate a behavioral design aspect because you're going to have a hard time convincing people, the team, to go back and revisit something because you did measure and found out that, not that many people were. That the levers you were pulling and pushing for the behavioral design not as effective as you hoped, I think you'll have a hard time changing it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's right. That feels right to me. But it's also like, it's just, like I said, it's a new project then,
Yeah.
right? Like it's just, you're not doing the project anymore. You're doing a new project.
So, this brings me to the fact that, and one of the, because we talked about the 3 methodologies, user-centered design, design thinking, and agile, and how well they would handle behavioral design work. And I think we're saying user-centered design handles it the best, but which actually I hadn't thought through before we started this conversation. So if you had said, all right, what's your answer? I wouldn't have known I was going to say that. But it doesn't surprise me that I'm saying that. And you have a smirk on your face because
yeah, sure.
I love user-centered design. And so I'm probably going to settle on that. But I do also want to raise the issue because a while ago, you and I put together a behavioral design methodology, a specific methodology for doing behavioral design work. Do you remember that? Yes? No?
Yeah. Sure.
And we did, we have it. We have a behavioral design methodology that we use. But I can't say it's, it is not in wide adoption like design thinking or agile is, for sure.
Yeah. And that's okay.
And that's okay. But I think, one of the reasons we did that was we knew that there were some things about behavioral design that were special and unusual. And I think if we could just take 1 minute to highlight just some of the things, if no matter what methodology you're using, if you want to do behavioral design, there are a few key pieces in here that we found were important. And one of them was early on, you have to, I don't remember exactly how we worded it, but it had to do with truth. Do you remember that? Like, what's really going on?
Yes.
And what is it you really want and why? Because we found sometimes people aren't being, the organization or the stakeholders that are working on this are not really being honest with themselves about what's really happening. And you're going to have a hard time changing behavior if you don't really know what the behavior really is right now. And you don't really know what you want it to be and why. And it's, there's, organizations aren't always good at facing the truth. So the more you face the truth, the better the behavioral design process is going to go, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing that's really important to do early on. Another thing we found, and is built into our behavioral design method, is being really specific about what is the behavior change you are seeking. What's happening now? And what is it do you want? And making sure that's measurable, right? It has to be measurable. So it can't just be, oh, people will like doing this more. Okay. What does that mean? And what is the behavior you would see that would tell you that they do like it more? You got to get away from, things that are impossible to measure and turn it into what's measurable. I think this is some of the most fun part of behavioral design work, but it's also some of the most challenging. It can take a while for everyone to agree, okay, here's how we would really measure that. And, it's really easy to fall into, oh, well, here's some data we have. Can we use that? Oh, well, okay, but that's not measuring what we're talking about at all. So why are we going to use that data? Right. Well, we have it, okay. So figuring out what it is you want people to do and how you would measure that. And do you have that in place that you could measure it? And then I think another piece is that, once you've got all that, and then you figure out what is it you could do, what are the levers that you can pull or push in order to get that behavior. And then the whole thing, I mean, you've brought this up many times when we teach our workshop on behavioral design. These things are nuanced. Sometimes it's a quick thing, do this instead of that, and there you go. But most of the time, it's not that quick because it depends on the particular audience. And, you've got choices you're making about the different, are we going to use rewards? Are we going to use stories? Are we going to use, social norms? And it's nuanced, and you have to experiment. You have to pick the one or two that you think are going to be most powerful, and then you have to try it out and see if actually it really did work. And then you have to be willing to, change it if it didn't work. And that just takes time, and it takes experimentation, and you have to be willing going in to do that experimentation.
Yeah. I mean, but like it's it's the same problem, right? If you have the time and effort to put in, you'll probably get something out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, in summary, we have now decided, Guthrie, that if you want to do behavioral design, you should either use our behavioral design method, or you should use a user-centered design method. If you want to do it within agile or design thinking, you may have some challenges. But it's not impossible. I always think it's possible.
I mean,
but just I think it's useful.
If you want to do it, like I said, you'll find a way to get there. But I think it's useful to know that in certain situations it might be a little tougher. Sure. And you might need to play around. All right. So, Guthrie. Yes.
We have come to the end of our series. Our series of series. And we're probably going to do more series in the future, but I think it's going to be maybe a while. So probably, are we going back now? In our upcoming episodes, are we going to go back to our old ways?
We'll see. We'll maybe let's cross that bridge when we cross it. How's that sound?
Okay. And if people have questions or comments for us, they can reach us at.
It's going to be info@teamw.com.
TheTeamW.com. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And please do contact us if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover in the podcast. Guthrie, anything else you want to add?
No. I hope people sort of enjoyed the series. Thanks for spearheading this.
Yeah.
You were the lead.
I was the one that said, let's do a series. And you were like, what? What?
So there we go. There we go.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Guthrie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.